In this video, we're going to talk about graphing in factored form and standard form. So numbers 1 and 2 here are given to us in factored form because we see two factors, one of the first one and number 1 being x plus 7 and then x plus 3. And so our first step that we want to do is we want to go ahead and set each one of our factors equal to 0 to get our x-intercepts. So if I have x plus 7 equals 0, and I subtract 7 from each side, that's going to give me x is equal to a negative 7. So I can go ahead and plot that point right here, negative 7, 0. And then I can do the same thing with x plus 3. So I'll have x plus 3 is equal to 0. Subtract 3 from both sides. So I'll get x is equal to a negative 3. And I'll go ahead and plot that there. So those are my two x-intercepts, which are important to find. And then the next thing I want to do is figure out what my axis of symmetry is. And to find my axis of symmetry, I'm going to take each of these x-intercepts that I found, so negative 7 and negative 3, and I'm going to add them together, and then I'll divide that by 2, because our axis of symmetry and our vertex are always going to be halfway between our two x-intercepts. So negative 7 plus negative 3, that will give me a negative 10 divided by 2. So I know that my axis of symmetry, at least, is going to be at x is equal to negative 5. So I know I'm going to have my line that separates this and splits it in half at negative 5 here. Then, to get the actual point of my vertex, or the y value for that, I'm going to take this negative 5 and I'm going to plug it back in for x in my factors. So that will give me y is equal to negative 5 plus 7 times negative 5 plus 3, which is the same thing as negative 5 plus 7 gives me 2. And then negative 5 plus 3 gives me a negative 2. And then 2 times negative 2 will give me a negative 4. So I know my vertex is going to be at the point negative 5 comma negative 4. And then I can go ahead and I can plot that down here. And now I have 3 points that I can use. So I'm just going to connect those 3 together and make my U shape here. I also know it's going to make a U like a smile because I don't have a negative sign in the front here, okay? So those are our steps. Again, the first thing we want to do is we want to set our factors equal to 0 so I can get my two x-intercepts. Then I'm going to add the two x-intercepts together and divide by 2 to get my axis of symmetry. And then whatever I get from my axis of symmetry, I'm going to plug back into my original equation to get the y value of my vertex, plot those points, and then go ahead and make my parabola. Okay, so same process here. I'll set my x-intercepts equal to 0. So I'll have x minus 6 equals 0. I add 6, so I get x is equal to a positive 6. And I'll do the same thing with x minus 4. So I'll get plus 4 on each side. So I'll get x is equal to a positive 4. And again, I'm going to take those two. I'm going to add them together. So 6 plus 4. Divide that by 2. So that will be 10 over 2, which is going to give me a 5. So I know x will be equal to a positive 5 for my axis of symmetry. And again, I now take this 5 and I plug it back in for x in my original equation. So y is going to be equal to, remember to keep track of that negative in the front, parenthesis, 5 minus 6 times 5 minus 4. So that will be the same thing as y is equal to negative, parenthesis, 5 minus 6 gives me a negative 1. 5 minus 4 gives me a positive 1. So I multiplied it all out. I'll have a negative, and then I'll have negative 1 times 1, which will give me a negative 1. and then a negative negative 1 gives me a positive 1. So my vertex is going to be at the point 5, comma 1. And I go ahead and I plot that here. And then just like the last question, I go ahead and I connect my dots to make my parabola. And again, we can check this one's going to open down like a frown because again, we have a negative at the front here. So that's what we would do if we have a quadratic given to us in factored form. So we have those two examples there. Then if we scroll down a bit, we have numbers 3 and 4. Now numbers 3 and 4, I'm going to expect you guys to be able to do on your own because those are like the vertex form questions from the previous page. And then we have questions on graphing by factoring. So this time they're given to us in standard form, and we're going to have to factor these in order to get our parabola here. So I'm going to do one, maybe two of these. We'll do two of these, and then I'll have you do the rest on your own. So I have x squared minus 4x plus 3. So I'm going to go ahead and factor this by looking for multiples of not negative 3, multiples of positive 3 that add up to a negative 4. So multiples of positive 3 that add up to negative 4. And that would give me negative 1 and negative 3. And since I have an a value equal to 1 here, I can just write my factors as x minus 3 and then x minus 1. And then once I get it to this step, I'm going to treat it like those previous questions we just worked on. So I'll set x minus 3 equal to 0 and x minus 1 equal to 0. So x is going to equal a positive 3 and x is going to equal a positive 1. So I can plot those 2 points. Then I add them together and divide by 2. So 4 over 2, which will give me 2. So I know my axis of symmetry is going to be at x equals a positive 2. And then I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to plug it back in, just like before, to my original equation. So 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 3. That will give me 4 minus 8 plus 3, which will give me a negative 1. So I know that my vertex is going to be at the point 2 comma negative 1, which is down here. And then I go ahead and I connect my dots and get my parabola to look something like this shape here. Okay, and then the last one we're going to do is going to be number 7. Now, number 7 looks a little bit different because we have a negative in the front. So we're going to do one extra step before we start, and we are going to factor out the negative. That will make the rest of our work a lot easier. So if I factor out a negative from here, that's going to give me a positive x squared. And essentially, I'm just now changing the signs for everything. So instead of being minus 12x, it'll be plus 12x. And instead of minus 35, it'll be plus 35. And then I'm just going to go ahead and factor this section here. So I'm looking for factors of a positive 35 that add up to 12. And that's going to be 5 and 7. So I go ahead and I set my factors equal to 0. So I'll have x plus 5 and x plus 7. I set each of those equal to 0 now. So x plus 5 equals 0, x plus 7 equals 0, and I get x is equal to a negative 5 and x is equal to a negative 7. So I plot those. Then I find my axis of symmetry by adding them together and dividing by 2. So negative 5 plus negative 7 divided by 2 is negative 12 over 2. So that's going to give me x is equal to a negative 6. So that will be my axis of symmetry. And then I go ahead and I plug this back into my original equation. So I will have negative parenthesis negative 6 squared minus 12 times negative 6 minus 35. And so I go ahead and I simplify this. So that will be a negative 6 squared is going to give me a 36 minus a negative, or not minus, minus 12 times negative 6, which will give me a negative 72 minus 35. I'll go ahead and I'll make sure I get rid of my double negatives here and distribute my negatives in. So that'll be negative 36 plus 72 minus 35, which when I combine all that together will give me negative 1. So I know my vertex now is going to be at negative 6, negative 1, and that will be that point down here. Actually, I just realized I did my math wrong. It's not a negative 1, it's a positive 1. So negative 6 comma 1, so that would be this point actually up here. And that would make sense because this will make a frowny face because we have a negative in the front here. So I know my parabola is going to look like this. I would recommend using a calculator for these questions because it's a lot easier to go ahead and plug those numbers in, and that gives less opportunity to make mistakes when putting the numbers together. All right, but just make sure we set it up right. I just would like for you guys to do numbers 3 and 4, as well as 6 and 8.